Friends, today is Tuesday, February 13, 2024 at this VPC video devotional. And we are going to look at a passage that may be obscure for you. You might not have ever done a Bible study on this passage or really thought about this passage very much. It comes from the life of David. And David had such highlights and such dramatic moments in his life. You know, moments in battle, moments when he was anointed as a king and had to wait for years, moments of great friendship with Jonathan, moments of great conquest. He had moments of great failure. But this moment is an important moment just to take a look at, and it's from 1 Samuel 30, 1-6. So look out for the last line of this, the very last phrase. All right, here we go. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag, Z-I-K-L-A-G, Ziklag, on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and they had burned it down. They had taken captive the women and all who were in it, small and great. They had not killed them, but they carried them off. They went on their way. When David and his men came to the city, they found it destroyed and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. Have you ever had something so miserable that you just wept until your body could not weep anymore? There was no more moisture that could come from your eyes. David's two wives had also been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was in great danger, for the people spoke of stoning him because all were bitter in spirit for their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord. Well, I chose this rather obscure passage because it does connect with what was undoubtedly the most terrible moment in the life of Horatio Spafford, who wrote the hymn "It Is Well" that we're looking at this week. Spafford received a telegram in 1871 from his wife Anna, and the context is that Spafford he had lost his a lot of his fortune in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. The real estate burned down. They didn't have insurance provision, and so he had taken a huge financial reverse, and this complicated his business life. And he was supposed to go to England. He was actually supposed to help to organize and participate in a crusade that was happening in London. Long before Billy Graham, there were crusades, and he was supposed to go across and be a part of this spiritual event where an American evangelist was going over it to share the good news in various locations in London and its environment. And so he was there for a spiritual purpose. His wife and his four daughters were going to go with him. They were supposed to take a transatlantic boat. And the boat was called the SS Ville de Havre. And it was a beautiful steamship. And unfortunately, the steamship was caught in an accident in the Atlantic. It hit another boat, and it sank. And so every effort was made to rescue folks from the ship, but Horatio received a telegram from Anna that simply said, his wife, it simply said, "Saved alone." Can you imagine? They had lost four daughters who had drowned in this terrible accident. Now, Horatio, very understandably, he didn't waste any time. He booked an immediate passage to go across the Atlantic himself, and he was grieving, and they got to the spot which was close to where the ship had sunk that had carried his daughters, now the watery grave of his children, his four children. And he wrote the words at that spot, on the ship as he was traveling to see his distraught wife in England. He wrote the words to "It Is Well with My Soul." The passage I chose from 1 Samuel 30 is a similar moment of grief from the life of David. David had been harried by Saul, and you may remember David had served Saul. He had helped Saul defeat the Philistines. He had been his best commander. He had risked his life against Goliath. He had actually provided psychiatric care to Saul, who had some mental disability, mental health issues, and he certainly had some paranoia and maybe some psychosis. And he would become angry. He would become beside himself, and he became angry and jealous of David because people were celebrating David's role in these victories. And David would actually calm Saul's soul. It's hard to say. Saul's soul. Say it quickly with me 3 times. Saul's soul, Saul's soul, Saul's soul. By playing the guitar. He was a guitarist. He wrote many of the Psalms. And he would sing and play, and it would calm Saul. But eventually Saul went after David and tried to kill him. Warned by Jonathan, he got away, and he had to go into hiding. He became someone who was in a virtual exile, living in desert places and waste places, and eventually gathered around himself a troop of other people who had no country, no place to live. Some of them probably were criminals. And they began to be mercenaries in this area. And they had a little village, and he had 2 wives at this point, David did, and the others as well. And he, because of his great insight, he was always a great strategist, became the leader of this band, and he took them off to forage and on an expedition. And while they're away, he left the place unguarded where their families were, and they were all abducted. And so his men were ready to kill him. They were ready to rebel. And so he had lost his life in his original family. He'd lost his role in the court. He'd become a wanted person by the king, and now he had lost his secondary. It looked like he was going to lose his secondary group as well. But notice at the end, David strengthened himself in the Lord, like Horatio Spafford, who wrote the poetry of faith in the midst of his great loss, who poured out his grief to God, who brought his pain to the Lord. David did the same thing, and he took strength in the Lord. Let's pray. When we suffer loss, help us to turn not toward denial or anger, but faithward. Teach us to say with Horatio Spafford, "It is well with my soul."